Hey there friends, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I'm of course Paul Glasgow here, the one and only Truth Pimp, and what a wild and crazy 12 hours we've had, right?
We were at a barbecue and it was getting crazy. When he started running at me, reached for the back of his pants, I just pulled out my firearm. Once the target was down so that he's not a threat anymore, I just called you guys.
The majority of programs immediately exclude you if you happen to be in a gun-free zone at the time that the incident occurs.
The strike force was called. If that doesn't happen in this case, he's still sitting at Rikers Island today.
Lawyers are like real life superheroes because you can give people a chance to really get a second chance in life.
Folks, I use attorneys on retainer and I suggest you do too if you carry a firearm or you do anything to protect your family. Use my code FTATF for a discount at sign up. Bombing in Iran. 3 nuclear production facilities. You guys have all heard about it. Everyone has an opinion. Sides are split. All that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into the argument, although I would like to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. But I'm not going to get into the argument one way or the other. I want to point out some realities that we're facing now because of what's done is done and it has happened. First of all, Operation Midnight Hammer. The last time I had in my mind the Operation Midnight Hammer was when Paul Pelosi's boyfriend broke into his house and they fought over a hammer with drinks in their hands while police watched with body cam videos. So as soon as I heard Operation Midnight Hammer, that's exactly what I thought of. But make no mistake, whatever your political thoughts are on why and if this should have happened, it was a very impressive operation. As you guys know, 3 nuclear facilities. This is the main one, Fordo, right now, that was hit. This is before and after picture, before on the left, after on the right. And these were where they were manufacturing their nuclear capabilities as far as weapons. Now, I think they were up to 60% enrichment, and it takes 90% in order to make a weapon, a nuclear warhead. And to my understanding, once you get to 60, it's nothing to get to 90%. So that's why the accelerated need, if you will, to swoop in and bomb these places was taking place. So again, that's all speculation. That's all coming from intel. We don't know how much that intel is true. As usual, who knows if any of that is true? Maybe we just wanted to bomb them. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, rarely do we get the full story on what intel is. So I'm repeating to you what the intel that they disclosed was. There was a lot that made them realize they wanted to go in here, and it may not have had anything to do with enrichment of uranium, which I think we can all thank Hillary Clinton for that. Most impressive thing to me was the fact that we used, I believe, 7 B-2 bombers, stealth bombers. Pretty incredible. There were a total of, I believe, 14 of those massive ordnance bombs that weigh 30,000 pounds apiece. I think each one of those B-2s carried 2 of those, to my knowledge. There were ghost planes, decoy planes, submarines, diversion tactics. Remember they talked about B-2s being launched a couple days ago, headed to Guam. That was never the case. There were actually B-2s that went west as if they were going to Guam, but they were never intended to actually go there for the purpose of doing anything with Iran. The actual B-2s that did the bombing went east instead and stayed in flight for 36 hours. And I think that's incredibly impressive. Obviously, they can refuel in the air, and I believe they can stay in the air for a total of 44 hours without having to land and regroup. So to me, that's super impressive that these aircraft are capable of that. Now, what comes out of this, right? What's the repercussions? Again, what's done is done. So for us to sit here and relitigate everything that led up to this, I think is pointless because we are where we are at this point. I have a lot of reservations. I'm going to tell you my initial thoughts is I don't want to see a single American harmed, whether it's a civilian or whether it's military, as a result of this, because I'm tired of us donating American blood and lives for nothing. We get nothing. I mean, we get nothing. We get guys from the CIA get trophies and plaques and pats on the back. We get coffins coming home draped in American flags. And I'm tired of that. I think most of you are too. I think that's why Trump had such a big following, because most people believe Trump's not going to get us into another war. Are we in another war? I don't know. Are we? Regardless, again, we are where we are. What am I worried about? I'm worried about all those military bases in close proximity to Iran. The closer you are, the harder it is to shoot these missiles down. Actually, within the last week, Iran has successfully utilized some hypersonic missiles, which obviously the Iron Dome technology does not usually work against those, and they make it through that security. So, I mean, that defeats the Iron Dome and all that. Not to say that we might not have additional technologies, but when you can defeat that Iron Dome defense system, that gives you a whole different laundry list of things that now we have to really worry about. And again, those bases, most of them, a lot of them, are very, very close to Iran. Now, granted, we are doing evacuations right now of Israel, of American people, citizens. So American citizens have been asked to leave Israel. And just as of a couple of hours ago, American citizens have been asked to leave Lebanon also. You'll remember back in the 80s, 90s, probably starting back in the 70s, Beirut was a hotbed. I mean, they bombed us in every possible way, from our embassies to our troops to our bases, every possible conceivable way in Beirut that they could do it. So Lebanon has never been a fan of the United States. And again, the call went out a couple of hours ago for all Americans to leave Lebanon. My thinking is, why are you there in the first place? I get it, work and whatever. But yeah, get out if you're over there. So that's, to me, a warning. Now, it doesn't mean that necessarily Iran specifically is going to do this. Remember, Muslims hate us. Muslims hate non-Muslims. So any Muslim, especially a lot of them in the Lebanon area who already hate us, they're looking for a reason to kill an American. It wasn't like they said, thank you. No, yesterday, before the bombs were dropped, they wanted to kill Americans. Now they feel empowered to kill Americans. They feel like they have people in the Middle East who will back them up, kind of like a trendy thing. Hey, it's the cool thing again to kill Americans. So that's why I think there's this heightened sense of awareness regarding that in the Middle East area. Even Pakistan has come out and condemned the bombings, even though, let's be really honest here. Pakistan, a lot of Muslims in Pakistan also, a lot in the leadership as well. But Pakistan kind of has to take the side of Iran so they don't get their own butts handed to them in certain ways. I know they have nukes, but they're a bunch of pansies, Pakistan is, and they kind of have to condemn this. When in reality, when cameras aren't on and they're in the back rooms, dude, they're high-fiving each other in Pakistan for what the United States did to Iran. They hate Iran too. But again, for visual, I guess, clout, they got to go on record and say we condemn this. So whatever. Things that bother me. Again, I don't want to see Americans hurt or especially killed in any kind of way. What's worrisome to me is here more than anything. We hear the term sleeper cell, and we hear it so much that we start to, it sounds kind of cliche. It sounds kind of lame. Oh, no, sleeper cell. But it's a real thing. And let's not forget what Barack Obama, it probably was him, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did with the southern border and the, quote, border security for 4 straight years. They let millions of people in, undocumented, unvetted, and not just, I know a lot of the focus because of ICE and all that is on people south of the border, countries south of the border. Make no mistake, Chinese nationals, Iranian nationals, Russian nationals. There were bad people coming into this country from all kinds of other countries who hate us, including radical Islamists.
There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. And you compare that to the Trump administration, zero. Right, 0 releases. And right now, because of President Trump's leadership, we have the most secure border in my lifetime, most secure border in the history of this nation. So we have a secure border. That was President Trump's big win on securing this nation. So we're not releasing people in this country. Special interest aliens aren't crossing that border undetected. But under Joe Biden, we had over 10 million people cross that border. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away, because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis that Biden created that over 2 million people crossed the border and got away.
Now you might be thinking, who cares? A couple of little radical Islamists, cavemen, came in through the southern border. Whoop-de-doo, I don't care. I have my guns, I'm good, whatever. It's really more than that. I don't know if you guys remember the Cybertruck blowing up at the Trump Tower in Vegas back in January. Remember that? I did quite a few videos on that, explaining, I guess, the unexplainable and still questions that are unanswered from back then. But one of the things that popped out back then, because there was a series of different types of interviews taking place, was Sean Ryan's show, and he had interviewed Shoemake. There's some interesting information that came out back then, and if you tie that to what Tom Homan just said in that video clip, think about what Tom Homan just shared when you watch this next clip from Sean Ryan's show regarding Iran and manpads.
But we had two solid sources, one south of the border and then one from an element within our own government that confirmed independently of each other that some Iranian-made manpads, so surface-to-air missiles, had come across the border. We had the location and everything else. Well, Doc, that's what he goes by, Doc Chambers, he put this out on a podcast, and I was very emphatic, like, this is not stuff that I like to put on social media. I'm an intel guy by trade. This stuff is not for social media consumption. We got this to Secret Service. We did the whole gamut and got everything pushed to them, and that's why Trump was pushing a lot of this stuff out when he was, because we had told the Secret Service, and they had the reporting and everything else. But we have not, to my knowledge, have not recovered those manpads. Now, I'm not privy to that, but what I do know we have done is we have apprehended the couriers on a second run of theirs, and we have local law enforcement got together with federal law enforcement and rolled up the safe house in, I will not say that on this show, but they rolled up the safe house where it was, and we have since identified what that issue was on the border.
Now, let me just. Where did they come through?
They came through an actual point of entry, in a legal point of entry along the border. I'd have to pull up the original reporting, but we had the actual.
So we now have Iranian missiles. Who knows how many inside the United States?
That's what worries me. That's the kind of stuff that worries me right there. So it's not the fact that you might have some crazy little guy down the road that wants to, get his minivan and drive through a crowd of people on July 4th, which is a real thing. Watch out for that. I won't be anywhere near a massive crowd in a couple of weeks celebrating Independence Day. But nevertheless, yes, those are real threats. But the fact that they have the capability in this country right now to not only shoot down airplanes full of hundreds of American people or people in general, but they also have people who hate us in this country also, according to Tom Homan, who are already here, already hated us, already wanted us to die, and now we've bombed our homeland. They really want us to die now. I think the threat here is probably just as present as these bases overseas right now. I don't think we can sit back and cross our arms and throw our feet up and go, cool, they can't hit me with a missile. Well, it's not the missile from Iran that I'm worried about. It's the people doing things on behalf of Iran who are here. That's the kind of stuff on a much smaller scale, but at the same time equally dangerous because they can take out as many people. So I think we have to be real careful of that in these heavily populated areas. Unfortunately, I have to fly pretty soon. Not real excited about that. But as far as big gatherings, won't find me at one. I will do everything I can to stay away from any kind of a large gathering. I will certainly take my hat off and, pop a couple fireworks and drink a couple beers on Independence Day. But I will not be around a group of people where things are going bang and catching fire and blowing up. Not going to find me anywhere near there. Now, one of the other things that was oppressive about, or equally impressive about this operation last night, speaking of Pelosi and speaking of Operation Midnight Hammer, was the very fact that the Pentagon gave a little bit of a brief ahead of time to some Republican members of Congress, but to 0 Democrat members of Congress. And how did that work out? Well, guess what? Those planes were able to go over to Iran undetected. There wasn't a shot fired at one of them. They completed their mission. No one was hurt, no one was shot, no one was shot at, and they headed back home. As soon as they headed back home and were in safe airspace, they notified Congress and all the Democrats. Democrats are mad. Nancy Pelosi says tonight the president ignored the Constitution by unilaterally engaging our military without congressional authorization. Well, that's just an ego trip for a lot of these people. They're mad because they feel like they have these elite positions of power, and that everybody, including the president, should always ask permission. And in many ways, I agree. If the Constitution requires it, fine. I didn't hear a peep out of any of these people when Barack Obama was dropping hundreds of bombs. Hundreds, not 14. Hundreds of bombs on Yemen, on Libya. Everywhere else in Africa and the Middle East, Barack Obama took it upon himself to bomb. Not a peep out of anybody, and I might add, not much of a peep out of Republicans either. Again, we go back to, they don't fight by the same set of rules, Democrats and Republicans do. But that's why this operation was so stealthy and successful. It's because there wasn't a Democrat that was notified about this who would leak it, because they would leak it. These are the same people who are protecting all of these illegal aliens, rapists, criminals, murderers across this country, wanting to fly to the other country to go meet with them in their home country's prison because they're so mad at Donald Trump being president right now. I think we kind of have to wonder also, where would we be today if this, let's just assume that the intel was all legitimate and that Iran had 60% enrichment of their uranium, meaning they were very close on the doorstep of a nuclear weapon, which they would have used against us at some point, right? What would have happened if Trump hadn't won? And I'm serious, think about this. I want you to go back in your mind when you get done watching this video and think. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz. God dang, what a weirdo. If these two would have been in office, how would we have handled this? First of all, you know we probably wouldn't have done anything, right? I know that, and this is Republicans and Democrats, I know there's a lot of war hawks. A lot of people want us to bomb people. They're all, notice how we're not talking about Ukraine much right now, but they all want us to bomb somebody because they all make money off of it. Again, both parties make a lot of money when we're at war with someone. But the Democrats, what would they have done if we were faced with this? Because remember, Barack Obama was the one behind the scenes pushing all the buttons with Joe Biden in there. Iran is his friend. Valerie Jarrett is Iranian, and that's who pushed all of Barack's buttons. That's who really was in control when Barack Obama was in office, was Valerie Jarrett. Valerie Jarrett's still there, and again, she is Iranian. So they are big fans of Iran. Remember, Barack sent them $1.7 billion worth of cash on pallets. So the Democrat Party loves them some Iran. So what would we have done? And then on top of that, if we felt like we had the balls, we certainly had the balls in our military in female positions, but if we had the balls, these are the people who would have been in charge of any military action if Kamala had won and something had to have been done. Look at all these butchy, well, it's not butchy. Look at all these men in ponytails and dresses who would have been the ones calling the shots in some kind of a critical geopolitical situation involving the Middle East and the United States. I, for one, am thankful that it's Donald Trump and his guys, real guys, in charge right now, guys wearing pants, not skirts. I'm super glad that that's where we're at right now. I'm politically torn in this because I don't want us fighting other people's wars anymore. I'm tired of it. Done. If it affects us somewhere, if we, again, we're going based on intelligence. I don't trust people delivering intelligence these days. But if we believe any of the intelligence that Iran was intending to use bombs on us, then sure, I can see some of that. But again, it's how much of the intelligence you actually believe. Again, just glad these dudes are not the ones calling the shots right now. Be safe out there, guys. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. I don't want to see anybody at big gatherings get hurt here stateside. I just don't want this to erupt into something that is a slow burn and we end up giving up American lives along the way. And I certainly don't want to see our military being used as fodder out there to fight other people's wars for them. I will say this, big giant hat tip to our military on what seemed like an absolutely flawless military operation last night. There were men and women in our military that did some very impressive things. things last night. They didn't just press buttons. There was a lot that went down. There was a lot of strategic thinking. There was a lot of stuff that went down. A lot of people who did things that they were supposed to do, and they did a really good job of it. So big hat tip to our military for pulling off such a successful and flawless operation last night.